Baptists That Amish Chick. Let's get into it.
Is God a woman? Is that a question you've ever thought or maybe even heard before? It's definitely a question that I haven't heard until recently, right? Like that's like a newer question. But today we're actually going to discuss that topic. Is God a woman? And before you switch, don't turn it off. Like, it's okay. Here are insight first. Because we do have a reason for addressing this question.
Well, you had something that happened too, like the other week that kind of made us talk about the subject too.
Oh gosh, I don't even remember.
Well, you were getting your hair done.
Oh, okay. Yes, I would. Yes, I'll get. Yes, thank you for reminding me, because I thought about it earlier, like 5 minutes ago when we were talking about this episode. But like, as women, we continually hear we're made in His image. But then we're expected to fully step into our feminine, like step into this like position of being a woman. And then the only example we're given is essentially like, if we're supposed to be like Jesus, is an example of a man. And like, we talk about God, Holy Spirit, and Jesus, all three. A lot of the times we typically hear it from a man's perspective. And so where do we fit? Like, are we made in His image? 100%.
Yeah.
100% we're still made in God's image. And I think I have a unique take on this, but I want to, like, I think we all probably have a slightly different take. A lot of similarities, but just slightly different.
Yeah.
Just a little different.
Right. And like, I think this, even talking about this subject, helps with the whole, like, because I think a lot of people don't think about it intentionally, that we're like, women are made in the image of God just as much as men are, because I feel like a lot of men, and this is my story, right? So I don't know that this is true for every single woman out there, but I think a lot of women, it's almost like a male dominant, like, view on God. And not discrediting, like, yeah, men are absolutely made in God's image, not taking that away,
right?
But just and when you bring this subject up to like people in church or people with a religious view, oh my gosh, they're like, no, like, literally, we had a conversation with my family over Christmas time where my sister, who's not, like, most of my family is still Amish and Mennonite, and my sister and I are the only ones who aren't. And I mean, there's 10 kids, right? So like, we're 2 out of 10 who aren't. And my sister like started having this conversation about women and being equals with men. And you should have seen my brothers just lose their shit. I mean, talk about like, well, you have a role, like, basically like your role, you can't, you're supposed to submit and whatever, and like completely taking it out of context. But it was literally just like, we're made in the same image. It's a different version or a different like expression of God, right? But it's the exact different doesn't mean less than. I think a lot of people, when they say different, they mean less than, or instantly it's taken as, okay, it's less, this is less than that, right? Because it's quote unquote different. And different doesn't mean less than. Different just means different. Like, it's not the same thing, but the value of it hasn't changed. And I find it so interesting that I saw my brothers react that way, and I was like, it's like they wouldn't say it, but they believe that women are less than men, and they're not necessarily made in God's image. They would say they're made in the man's image because they came from the man. But do you know, before men and women were separated, or male and female were separated, they were both human, and then God did that, right? So we're both made in the same image and from the same thing. So you can't devalue one from, they're literally the same thing, or from the same thing, just different expressions. So like, hearing my brothers say that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, you really believe that? And like, I used to think that too, but it's really a really simple thing to debunk, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
But most people don't even realize how much they hold on to that.
It's always so shocking to me, and especially with some of the comments we've gotten on previous episodes that we've done, talking about men and women, and even some of the purity culture. Hearing some of that, I was like, listen, Spicy Leslie came out like, it makes a lot of men really uncomfortable when women have an
Mhm.
opinion and when women stand and own their role.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Go for it.
Do you really think your wife has value if you only think like, if you don't think your wife has value, you clearly don't think she's made in God's image.
Yeah.
And one, everyone is, so you're fooling yourself.
Mhm.
Two, I just don't understand. I don't understand. Like, and I understand that religion can cloud a lot of things and can cloud
Sure.
your view. But, and I think this ties into even like the last 2 weeks, our previous episodes have been
Mhm.
about selflessness and self-care and even like self-worth and value.
Mhm.
I think it's so important that we make sure that we're holding people to that equal
Yeah.
standard. I loved what you said. You're like, I can walk in and I walk into a room and know that I'm just as smart as anybody else in there, regardless of their degree, regardless of this. And I'm like, no, you have your areas of like expertise and what you know,
Mhm.
and you have your things that you like naturally excel at and skills and all this.
Mhm.
But so do I. I do things way
Right.
different. And I excel at things that you don't. I don't
Right.
care how many degrees and letters are after your name. Right. And so like, I'm sorry, we kind of
Went.
veered.
No.
But coming back, like, we're all made in God's image.
Mhm.
And where does that image of a woman come from?
Right.
And I think we've like said this over like all of our episodes, we've sprinkled it in, but we've never actually fully addressed it. And that's why we want to have this discussion and talk about it. And I think I want to pass it to you because Berlin is actually, I never thought twice about it. Like it was almost like there were bigger fish to fry for me to like figure out other stuff for myself.
Yeah.
And hearing you talk about it, I went, well, damn, I don't know that I've ever given that a second thought. And so here you go.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I was raised in a world where you had God, you had Jesus. Holy Spirit was, people will say like, Holy Spirit was a bird, or Holy Spirit's the one who tells you the things you did wrong, which that's Satan.
No.
But anyways, so like Holy Spirit wasn't actually real because I didn't actually know who Holy Spirit was. And so it wasn't until just a few years ago that I started to actually encounter Holy Spirit and have conversation with Holy Spirit and understand the Holy Spirit was actually a piece of God, and I could actually decide which part of God I wanted to talk to. And when I started to learn about Holy Spirit, I don't know where it came from or when, I couldn't even tell you the moment, but all of a sudden I was like, we're made in God's image. Holy Spirit is the one that is kind and sweet and loving, and not that Jesus and God aren't kind,
Right.
but like this
The nurturing aspect.
yeah, like if I'm stressed about something, for me, I journal when I talk to God. I'll like write down my thoughts and write down what I hear God saying, where it's like a little text message conversation, right? And I would have these conversations where it's like, hey, Roland, it's okay. It's going to pan out this way. Here's what's going to happen. Don't be nervous because of this. Don't stress because of that. Like, I've got you. I'm going to give you this. And I realized that it was the more feminine, nurturing side. And so when people started to talk about Holy Spirit and they'd be like, Holy Spirit, he, Holy Spirit, he, I was like, no, it's Holy Spirit, she. If we're made in God's image, there's got to be a piece that reflects the woman's not character, but like
nature,
that feminine nature, right? Like that feminine power, that feminine like divinity, like sort of concept. And so I was like, that's Holy Spirit. Because if there isn't, like, we're made in God's image and we're, you know, the world, people, whatever, want us to carry this feminine aspect. Where does that come from if it's not actually directly reflected in the Trinity? And also, how is that reflected in, like, even across gender, right? Like, even men have a part of femininity. And
yes,
in the same way that, like, we have testosterone in our bodies as women, right? It's just in different amounts. Like, it's the same way when it comes to the different aspects of masculine and feminine in people, and each person is different. Right?
And even men have a little bit of estrogen, is it, in their body, like to a certain degree. It's just not as much as we do, but they
just
need
like our
it.
testosterone's not
Yeah,
like,
but if we wouldn't have testosterone in our bodies, we would be maybe a little more crazy. Like, you know, like because and same for them. If they didn't have estrogen,
they'd be angry.
But it's like in the amounts, right? But when you start talking about these things, people get so uncomfortable. Like, it's amazing how much people squirm when you talk about like feminine side of God, and God is also woman, and like,
which is well, and the way, like if you look at languages, a lot of different languages, when you're talking about in general about people, unless you're specifically talking about a woman,
Mhm.
it's man, right? And so even just from the simple linguistic aspect,
Right.
like, and here's the deal, I'm not a scholar on this thing, but it's actually something that really stood out, like learning Spanish in school, like what limited Spanish I like actually cared to learn. And then like learning German, like there's a lot of feminine and masculine when you speak. There's a lot of different, like, I don't know if y'all remember that part of any kind of language that you did in school, but when you're talking in general about people, most languages, it's a masculine word, right? And so I think so often we assume, and especially as English speakers, because we don't have the masculine and feminine of like nouns, right?
Right.
We don't have that. And so when we talk about people, people is just a generic term, but in other languages it's masculine, but it still almost has like, it has that connotation in the word, right? And so when it's talking about men specifically, yes, there are those verses where it's like, and the men numbered XYZ.
Yeah.
And they didn't count the women and children in those numbers. Like, there's so much important context, and like also knowing that, hey, just because it's saying he or man doesn't mean it's not actually talking about women too. And so I think that's actually really important context to understand, even just from like that linguistics aspect, right?
Yeah. I think when we acknowledge too that the Holy Spirit is female, the feminine attribute, that adds so much value to our voice, right? Because I think that's why in culture, look throughout history, women have been silenced, and in the church, Holy Spirit's usually silenced. A lot of things.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. The church is always like, we need to get more of God in the world. Then maybe you need to stop pushing the women down.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to acknowledge the Holy Spirit. Maybe you need to open up your dang ears and listen to your mother who's trying to talk to you. Like,
yeah. And like, even just like like both have value, right? And like, if you only have half of an answer, you're missing the whole, right? You only have half of it, and you're missing, you're missing because it's not fixing the problem. It's not like solving the issue, right? Like if you have half of a answer to a math problem or half of an answer to a science, equation or whatever, you'll never actually figure that out because you only have half of it. And it's never going to make sense. Like, it's like, there's something missing because this is not making sense. Well, it's the same way with this,
it's not going to function in its fullest.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not going to produce results like it was meant to, because you're missing half of it. And it's the same way with like, feminine and masculine, like men and women both. And I think that, I think a lot of women, like a lot of progress has definitely been made in like valuing women, right? And seeing the equality there. I think that a lot of women need to now own it, because I think a lot of women are still in that mindset of being less than, and then it's propagated as like, it's like that mindset is like nurtured by really unhealthy men who believe the same thing but wouldn't come out and say it, but because women are okaying it, then they feel like
they don't have to say it.
Yeah, they feel like they have the green light to just be that, right? Or do those things. And I think it's time for women to actually take up space. Like, you want, here it is, but now you're withholding because of what's inside of you. It shows more where women are at than like.
I think a lot of that came from teachings in church and stuff too. I think so many things start in churches, right? Because we have even people who they're like, oh, I don't go to church. My parents didn't go to church, but we're still holding values that my grandparents had and that their grandparents had and stuff, right? And so we talk about analogies a lot. And I know we've talked about some like in our purity culture episodes, we talk about analogies. I don't know if you guys have heard this analogy, but I heard this so many times in church where they would say the words women are just as valuable as men, right? But they would say, but their purpose is different. So I would say if you have the difference between a regular glass sitting there or like a plastic cup, the man is the plastic cup. He's something that's used every day. It can be filled up, like it has the same purpose. But the woman is like a precious china,
like
fine china. So yes, she can still hold things. However, she's more fragile. She's more breakable. She sits in the cabinet most of the time, only comes out on special occasions. And so they've tried to say this like well, they're equal, but at the same time, they're saying you don't have a purpose every day. You need to sit over here. We'll bring you out when
You're
you need
just
to,
for special
when you
occasions.
need to look pretty, we'll bring you out.
When we need to look good as a family,
Mhm.
then you're gonna like that's when it's your time to shine.
Right. Like, so one part of God only gets to shine at certain times then, like,
And that's exactly
Only
what
when
happens
you
in
want
the
to pull them
church.
out.
right? Well, think about it though, like the churches who embrace Holy Spirit, they kind of use him, don't they?
Mhm.
Like, not everyone. I'm not saying every church. I'm just saying,
Right.
like, a lot of charismatic churches love when Holy Spirit shows up and crazy things start happening. Like, they will like, I feel like I've seen this happen where it's like manipulation of Holy Spirit, or like
Yeah, I've seen that too.
getting Holy Spirit to do things to make you look good, to like display and show.
And
And
make it
there's
seem too like extremely loud and dramatic, and
Yeah.
it doesn't always like
no,
sometimes there's real things happening, but I have been
Right.
in rooms where you could just feel you're like, oh,
Something's not sitting right.
right.
yeah.
Yeah, and like I'm pretty sure Holy Spirit doesn't appreciate that, right? Like,
being used
yeah,
for a
exactly.
special
And like,
occasion to look
Yeah.
pretty.
yeah,
Mhm.
and I just thought about that now. I was like, oh dang.
And
Like-
then we've got the opposite end of that spectrum, right? Where these churches continue to sing, and I've used this example several times, like continue to sing, Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. But you need to sit down, shut up, and look the way we think you need to
Mhm.
look. We're
and
just gonna
only
sing the
come
song.
out when we want you to.
Exactly. Only come out for the special occasions within our
The last 10
boundaries
minutes
and
of
guidelines.
church.
And it better not get wild. You better not use tongues,
Right.
or we're shutting it down, right? Which I think is exactly what happens to women in
Mhm.
so many situations, whether it's
Mhm.
regarding church or home or a lot of different places. And I think,
We see it in culture in general. I mean,
yeah,
that's why we have so many women fighting for, equal pay, and why we have women fighting to make sure that, they have equal opportunity for that
Mhm.
CEO position, all those things.
mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. I definitely think that there's still a lot of room to grow in this
For
area.
sure.
Like, I'm not saying that we've come a long way, but there's still a long way to go, I think.
Mhm.
And I think that part of the answer to it is like women standing up and like, I'm not gonna let you treat me that way. I don't give a rip if I lose my job. Like, call it like,
Owning your place as a human.
yeah, exactly. And like but they also need a community. I feel like a lot of women don't have support to do that.
Right.
Like there's a lot of women. It's so funny because all of us women are wanting the same thing, yet a lot of us do when we're insecure about another woman being powerful?
Tear them down.
Yeah, so no wonder we don't feel like we have a community, right? Like there's a lot of like insecurity that we self-sabotage, right? And I mean, I know we've kind of gotten off the topic of is God a woman, but like
No, I think it all ties.
it all ties together, like it really does. And I wonder sometimes if Holy Spirit has more to teach us about our feminine side than we give her credit for, and I literally just had this thought right now. What if I asked Holy Spirit to teach me about my feminine side
Wow.
as a woman?
Well, and that's such a journey we're all walking on, and all of a sudden we
that.
just went, crap.
Yeah. Because that's something we've all been exploring. Like, what does like the divine feminine, which I know some people be like, that's new age, whatever. There's just different words
Right.
that other people are using. And there is this level of femininity to step into. And I think that there's also this confusion of women lowering themselves even in the church, because they're trying to follow this narrative of what they think femininity is, right? Femininity must be taking care of the kids. It must be cleaning the house. It must be this stay-at-home housewife
It's
who's
the
sweet
Proverbs
and
31
quiet
woman.
and all these
you know-
things. And
That needs to be a whole episode. Let's not jump into that one. Because that I
I was
mean,
gonna
I have a
say-
whole podcast on it. We'll do a
Yeah.
whole episode.
The
on it
Proverbs
one day.
31 woman is not what most churches make her out to be. She was a
Yeah.
badass
yeah,
who like changed the world, like CEO, making decisions, running
like,
businesses.
she was running the
like
house. Her running the house was not her cleaning toilets. That was her running a whole list of people who worked for her.
Yeah.
Like,
We'll get there.
yeah,
yes.
we'll get there.
But-
Subscribe.
Yes.
We'll get there.
but that's I think when I'm trying to go back to remember what I was trying to say there. No,
Sorry.
it's all right.
We're all on this, you said we're all on this journey of all three of us.
Yeah,
Holy Spirit.
it's like if we actually went and encountered Holy Spirit, like you said, like show us what femininity is. We're gonna have that, like, let's be real, there's a softness to femininity, right? There's that nurturing side. And I think there's a whole groups of women that are trying to make that their whole personality and what femininity is. And they're skipping over, they aren't finding that powerful piece, that definitive, I know the answer piece. They're living this place of a question, I can't decide, because in my opinion, Holy Spirit, whenever she comes to me, here's the answer. She knows her discernment,
Powerful, definitive, like
freaking on point with her. Like God's with me, God's usually like, yeah, you can do both if you want. You can do either one.
Right.
Like, it's kind of like, I'm just letting you do what you want. Holy Spirit's like, here's the strategy.
Yeah.
Here's the blueprint. Here's the plans. Here's how it's going to go. Like, very, very definitive. And so we even see that in culture where it's like, oh, well, women shouldn't be in powerful positions because their emotions control them, because this happens, so that happens. If we actually step in and grab onto what Holy Spirit has for us and that feminine side of the Holy Spirit and grab onto that, I think there will be women in powerful positions.
Yeah.
Women even just in their homes who have big decisions to make that are like, I know this is the decision that needs to be made because Holy Spirit has told me, and I have stepped into that where I don't even have to ask God about it, because I'm so in tune with Holy Spirit that I know what the right decision is. I know how to do this. I'm not run by my emotions per se, because I have this nurturing side that comes along with, this is an important decision that needs to be made right now and needs action taken on in this moment. So I think when as a church culture that is embraced, things are going to get shaken up, and you're going to start to see women that are like,
right,
taking charge in like the best way possible.
Right. And I think that a lot of what you just said, like there were some really good points you made.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And a few of them was, we were talking about emotions, like women can't be trusted because their emotions like rule them. Well, what if emotions are a superpower? What if they give you insight into things that you like this? See, like we're I feel like we are, what's the word I'm looking for when you make something bad that's good? Like not demonize, but condemning it or whatever. Like we're condemning and making bad attributes of a woman. Like,
and they're human attributes.
And we're limiting a woman.
Men have emotions too.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
not like,
exactly.
You think a hot-headed man hasn't had his emotions influence him? That's cool.
Right.
Honestly though, this whole conversation, literally, I've been listening to this song. It keeps coming up, and it came up this morning. If you ever listen to Taylor Swift, The Man, it's like, I wonder how different it would be if I was a man.
Yes.
Like I wouldn't be condemned on all these things. I'd be like, it's like I'd be a baller and not a bitch if I was doing certain things, right? And that's so the narrative, right? Like hot-headed man is okay in a powerful position, but a woman with emotions that are like, where she can get heated and she can be calm and she can do all these things, that's emotional and crazy.
Right.
Is it though?
And you're just limiting a woman to an attribute or an aspect of who she is. Do we, like, I think we do that with men and women both, is we limit them to like, this is an attribute of you, so this is who you are, and it's unhealthy because we see those attributes maybe come out in ways that aren't healthy, right? Just because an attribute comes out in an unhealthy way doesn't mean that it doesn't have value. It's like, that's an attribute of you. What is the healthy way to use that, and what is its purpose, right? Because there's so many attributes to both men and women, right? And we're talking about women, especially in this episode. Like, there's so many things that we do and have or whatever that make us a woman. And if we like only narrow it down to a few things and then like try to judge women on that instead of like, hey, this is something good about her, right? Like this is actually an edge she has, right? We've taken strengths and tried to turn them into weaknesses in order to control and manipulate. Like and what if we like took those things like, no, that's actually, and I've read a few articles here and there about they're realizing how much women are needed in like, for example, the marketplace. Like they're like, no, women have an edge that men don't, not degrading men, just realizing women are different in a good way. Like we actually need you. These things that we're missing in teams and in building things.
It's the difference with distinction.
Yeah,
Right? Isn't that
exactly. Unity with distinction. Well,
But like it is
Difference,
unity, like
right.
all of us working together within these marketplaces, right?
with distinction though.
Right. They're both needed. They're so
Yeah.
necessary.
And I just find that interesting that they're now
Just-
realizing that, oh, like women are actually needed in these
Mhm.
positions of being a COO, CEO, like man, whatever, because they bring things and they also said they can see things that men can't.
Mhm.
Like their intuition, their ability to see, their perceptions, and
So kind of like Holy Spirit on the side.
well,
I'm like, all you gotta do is ask
Lance, if you're listening to this, she loves you.
I do like it, but it's just there's differences, right? And the way that things are seen, and but the same thing with that,
Right.
like I don't see the rims on the car.
Right?
Does it drive? Like for
Yeah,
me, like
yeah.
you know, like he sees the rims on the car, he sees the engine. I can't see it. Like,
Right.
I don't know what kind of engine is in it. Like it's
Yeah.
all different. So
And that's why
It's
it's
powerful.
Like, yeah, and it's so important to like see this as a team. Like we're side by side in different positions, but the same playing field. And there's no I think when we truly as a society begin to see men and women as equals, with literally we don't have any whether we see a man or a woman, our perception about them doesn't change. When that happens as a society is when we'll know that we've reached the point of valuing both at the same level
Mhm.
and seeing them as equals. And I don't think we're there yet.
No, we're not. What I think is, so in the beginning, we mentioned a story that I actually experienced several weeks ago. I was getting my hair cut, and just in conversation, something was mentioned about somebody like gendering God. And it was mentioned, something was said about like, no, God's a man, God's a man, God's a man. And I was like, Jesus was a man. God is God. But I was like, Holy Spirit's a she. And I think the thing that everyone gets so hung up on around this conversation is the fact that we're using a pronoun, right? Like, because pronouns are a hot topic right now.
Well,
so
I think
that
like,
aside,
are you talking from Mother Earth?
like, put that aside. Like, that's not even, but I was like, so, and I just kind of posed the question, and it's kind of like exactly how we're posing this question to you. Like, if we're all made in God's image, where the heck do women fit into that equation? So are we not made of God? We're just here for shits and giggles,
Right?
like, you know,
well,
'cause I
where
don't
did
think
we come from?
Sometimes we are.
Yeah.
But
Well, where did we come from? Literally, like if we're not made from God, like literally he's the creator of everything. So it's really hard for the creator of everything to not make something.
right.
That is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so of course, like as soon as I posed that question, no. And it was really funny. I was like, uh-oh. Like I was like, I'm by myself right now. The girls are here. I was like, I might have to have them help me dig out of this here in a minute.
Call my friends.
Like, hold on, I need to put them on speakerphone. No, but like, of course, like in the back of my mind is like, listen, we're not in the same place. Like, I know who I'm having this conversation with, right? And so it was definitely one of those points where I was like, meet them where they're at.
Right.
I just posed the question and I left it there. I was like, I'm not going to push the narrative. Like, I'm not trying to push. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. If you want to continue to call Holy Spirit, go for it. Like, it's no skin off our back, right? I still do.
Yeah.
Like,
I
it's
still do that
it's literally
too.
habit. Like,
yeah.
I know every time you say an episode, I'm like, just said he.
I know it drives her crazy. And then you say she, and I'm like, oh yeah. It's so funny.
The last episode we did,
You did. I went.
I was like, I was like, oh.
We turned. We're like, what? What'd you say? So I think it's really funny that we all have these very different takes, and that's okay, right? Like we're all at different points, and this is the whole point of this whole podcast.
Yeah,
is like knowing where you're at on this journey and like reestablishing something, because a lot of stuff is going to get torn down and a lot of stuff is going to get built back up. And what you're tearing down, I hope, is the religion, and what you're building up is the truth. And so like this is your journey. And if this is
Mhm.
not something you're like, I don't care about the pronouns or the gender or whatever.
Mhm.
Cool. Like that's not everyone's cup of
Right.
tea. It's just something that I know a lot of people are, it's a conversation that's coming up more and more. And so we do want to address these
Right.
things and we want to
Right.
have a voice out there.
Yeah.
And not that we have all the answers,
Right.
but this is our take on it. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
And, even like you said, it's our take on it. It's what we've seen. And I'm pretty sure we're not alone. Like, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure other people see these things as well.
Mhm.
And it's an uncomfortable conversation to have for some people. Some people are like, I've never actually thought about that. And sometimes you don't realize what you don't think about until you are made to think about it, right? Or like until the conversation's had and you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And now that I think about it, yeah, I've always thought that or believed that, not because I like chose to, but because I was made, like programming, whatever you want to call it. And so I feel like there's a lot more conversation that people can have with themselves, like you, the listener, like this is, I really feel like this is meant to provoke you in a good way to like go search out what you believe, right? To go have that, like maybe
have that conversation with Holy Spirit.
yeah, like and maybe
Are you a woman?
yeah,
What are you?
what are you? And so yeah, it's an invitation for you to like discover more. And if it offended you, I'm really glad that it did, because offense is
Tied that with the bow.
yeah. If offense is an opportunity for an upgrade. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been offended in my life, and every time it was because it was something inside of me, not because of what that person was saying,
Right.
And it was an opportunity for me to like take care of stuff inside of me. So you guys have anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's great.
On
I
that
think we've figured out that God's a woman.
Yeah. On that note. All right, guys. If you haven't given us a rating yet, do so. We'd love to like see you rate this podcast, give us feedback. It's always good to just see feedback from you guys. We love to hear that. So go do that if you haven't yet. We'd love to hear from you. And that's it for this week. We'll see you next week.
See ya.